Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole. On today's episode, we have Jeff Parrett. Join us for another Relationship Anarchy research conversation. Together we talk about owning our part in the speed bumps, moving into a world of co-creation, and reconfiguring our relationships to flow with change. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name's Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy. And I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, these relationship anarchy episodes are some of my favorite episodes on this show. It is such a joy to explore the practice of relationship anarchy, and I'm so thankful for all of you anarchists out there who have submitted your answers to these questions, who have come onto the show to meet with me. And I just want you to know, dear listener, that the door is open for you to submit your answer to these questions. And I just really hope you're learning, and I hope that you're having fun. I'm having fun each week tuning in and just getting to see these different sides, these different perspectives to the practice, and yeah, really growing in the space with you. And I know so many of you have been asking about my dissertation. Where can you find it? How can I read it? And I am excited to announce that I have published my dissertation on my website. So you can head on over to the Relationship Anarchy tab, and you'll be able to download it there and read it, all 160 plus pages of content on relationship anarchy. So I'm really excited to be sharing that research with you and to be continuing the research with all of these very special conversations. All right. If you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially our newest community member, Justin. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible for all people. So thank you. If you want to join the community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchy, also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. So then the first question I like to ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
I'm a mature man who has lived an amazing life. I have settled into this place where I want to find balance around relationship and deconstruct a lot of the social conditioning that we have around relationship in terms of, our male female dynamic or whatever gender dynamic in today's world, and look at ageism. And we have some conditioning around older man, younger woman, or older woman, younger man.
Right. Yeah, lots of conditioning around all of this, which is why it's such a fun space to talk about it. And so I'm looking forward to going through the relationship anarchy questions with you today.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So the first one is, what is relationship anarchy?
You know,
I know the easy one. My dissertation,
right?
I was like, how do I answer this again and again? I don't know, man.
Just go right to the heart of the matter,
Yeah.
Nicole. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm all for directness. You know, for me, it's gotten to this place around crafting the relationships that work for me. You know, there again, there's that social conditioning, and we put labels on things, and we don't examine some of the underpinnings of where they're coming from. And so for me, I go into relationship anarchy not with any assumptions. And I've seen this a couple of places. It's not about not having commitments. It's about crafting our own commitments and being transparent and honest. And for me, there's a place where in any relationship dynamic, we're going to hit what I call speed bumps, and they're going to
Right.
throw us off our balance. And I believe I don't play the blame game. I don't play the shame game. And so let's, use this as an opportunity to grow and evolve. What was your part in the speed bump? What was my part in the speed bump? And,
Mhm.
the biggest thing I see is we don't examine our assumptions. And that sets a foundation for just so many things.
Absolutely. I appreciate that nuance of it's not about no commitments, right? Or no relationship agreements. It's about being, intentional with each individual person of what do we want in our dynamic here, right? And the freedom to explore all of that.
Exactly. We'll make mistakes. I mean, we're human beings.
Yes.
And we have to create a space for that.
hmm
And I just went through this with another communication with someone that wasn't about a relationship, but around a collaboration where we were using the same word, but we were interpreting it in different ways.
Right?
And it's like,
Yes.
oh, now I see what the issue was. And so, if we're not willing to talk and if we're not willing to kind of self-reflect, at my piece in this, and that's what
hmm
I love. The most attractive thing for me in any relationship is a person willing to have the vulnerability to share their heart
hmm
dynamic. When everything's going good, we don't have a problem. Right?
Right.
It's the speed bumps that, catch us, and life likes to deliver speed bumps.
Oh, yeah. And that's where we grow, right? So it's inevitable that we're going to hit those and grow with people. And all of us have different journeys of how far we have to grow depending on our parents and what family structures we started with, right? Some, myself included, we got to go through some really interesting ones, depending on where we started from. And we'll grow in relationships and continue to grow in relationships. So it's inevitable that we'll have that rupture. And it's about, right, the repair and coming back.
Exactly. And our willingness to, own our part in it.
Right.
And that's why I say, I won't shame you for what's going on in your world, and I won't blame you for what's going on in my world,
hmm
right? That we each get to own that piece of, what we're facing together. And, being again honest and transparent, it's actually really sexy when someone wants to have that deep kind of conversation with you. I
hmm
find it more attractive that when that happens, I feel closer to the person.
Absolutely. It's intimacy, right? So, yeah, to be seen, connected. Oh, I mean, those are the best things in life. And so you're already starting to hit on it a little bit of how do you practice relationship anarchy? So I'd love to hear more about, yeah, what this looks like in actual praxis for you.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word intimacy, and for me, I break that word down. Into me, you see,
Right.
right? Or into me, I see, right? Being willing to be self-reflective, and so that's really what it's about. And then it's like, okay, we live in such a sex dysfunctional culture, and how much of dating and like this concept of romance, I just struggle with it, because is it just me trying to get into your pants, or that there's some agenda behind it? And I do very romantic things with friends, and we
Right.
don't have a sexual relationship, right? And
hmm
so starting to take that dynamic out of it. And for me, the practice is, what do we do when we have our clothes on? Right?
Sure.
What's the co-creative social kind of connection that we have? And so that's what it becomes more about. And this idea of new relationship energy. It's like I've got to a point where I distrust it.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
me too.
is it just the universe bringing me together with someone because we have unfinished business with each other?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about it in the paradigms of other sorts of drugs, right? We take it low, we start slow,
Yep.
we know we're in an altered state of consciousness, right? And try to hold on to that when we're moving through those waters. And when I recorded with Jessica Fern, she was talking about like learning to trust ourselves after riding through that drug a couple of times too, to kind of notice the signs, feel the layout of the psychedelic landscape that we're like, oh, okay, I've walked here before, right? I kind of know what's going on. I know why
Yep.
I'm not sleeping at night, all of that fun stuff. But yeah, like you said, so much it's about what, is going on when you have the clothes on. There's such this preconceived concept that relationship anarchy is about who you're having sex with, which is almost the exact opposite, like it's a whole point of decentering your sexual and or however we define romantic relationships, right? So it's really
Mm.
supposed to be about that fullness of all of our relationships, which is why in my dissertation I had some people, and even through these conversations, some people who talk about relationship anarchy impacting their family dynamics and how they move through those worlds or work and other sorts of spaces. And so I think that's such an important thing that you're hitting on, that it's much more expansive than the ideas of non-monogamy or that sort of concept, or even that binary of monogamy and non-monogamy. Again, that's a world that's centering sex as our orientation to our whole relational landscape. And this is like, we are outside of that, my friends. We are going beyond that sort of binary here.
Exactly. And you hear people who are adrenaline junkies.
Mm,
I think there are a lot of us out there that are oxytocin junkies.
sure.
And we just want that hit of oxytocin. And how do you like have awareness of it? For me now, it's almost a red flag. It's like, wow, why am I feeling such, this, draw that like I'm almost like losing myself in it. I'm fantasizing, I'm making up all kinds of stories around what this relationship, what this, dynamic means when I meet
Yeah.
someone new.
Right. Yeah. Which I almost want to pull apart too in some ways, because, like, how beautiful oxytocin, right? It's giving
Oh
us
yeah.
grounding. We sleep better when we're with other humans. We feel safe, all of that fun stuff. And so that stuff's good. I think when I think about this, I think about the years of classical conditioning. And when we talk about other sorts of structures, right, like internalized homophobia, internalized racism, these various structures that are deep within our unconscious, and there's really no end to unpacking those. Internalized mononormativity is another one. I've gone through my whole life seeing this is what you do on the escalator, this is what it means. So, yeah, the second that we get this exciting partnership, it's like, cool, are we going to live together, have kids? It's like that has been classically conditioned in all of us, that the second we have this feeling, it means XYZ. And so the active process of deconstructing that stimulus and our response, oof, dizzying, dizzying.
It is, and and maybe it's an oversimplification in the way I look at, incorporating sex into a relationship. For me, sex is about reproduction or pleasure. And beyond that, it's mostly social conditioning. And so at my age, I have kids, grandkids, I have great
Right.
grandkids. And so that's not on my landscape. And, if I went out with someone and we had a great meal, it's, something we did together, we had an incredible pleasure. We'd talk about it and we'd share it with our friends. And, there wouldn't be this stigma, there wouldn't be meaning around it that's imposed by, again, that social conditioning that is, our family
Right.
dynamic, our generational dynamic, our cultural dynamic. And to
Mm-hmm.
just start to be aware of that. And I found myself in similar circumstances. So a big part of why I landed in relationship anarchy is I have this pattern where I lose myself in the relationship. And I like to call it the pit that I fall into. And I
Mm-hmm.
keep falling into it from different directions and in different ways. And so now it's about recognizing when I'm either A, in the pit, or on the precipice of the pit,
Mm-hmm.
and to choose to do something different. So the RA kind of mindset and paradigm has given me a structure to step back from that. And this whole thing about we don't label our relationships. Yeah, call it whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I have friends that I cuddle with. I
Right.
have friends that I hold hands with,
Right.
right? And we
Mm-hmm.
don't take meaning of it. So back to, yeah, oxytocin is important, and there are other ways to get it within any kind of relationship, whether it has a sexual dynamic or not.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And yeah, the label thing is such a tricky space. I mean, part of the ideas of relationship anarchy is what, like self-governance, right? So the people
Yep.
who want to not use labels, like I'm all here for that, right? It's your journey, your choice. For me, I like them. I like
Yep.
them. The reality is the person on the street that I'm walking past is not the person that I've shared my life story and complexities and is holding all of the facts about my mom and my sister and my whole world. Like there is a
Mhm.
difference between that I would like a word to, right? And
Yep.
so I find meaning in that. And I think it doesn't have to be anti relationship anarchy to use these labels. It's more so, again, about the flexibility of is it a prescriptive or descriptive label, right? When I say friend, let's get creative, folks. I can have sex with that friend. I can cuddle that friend. I could do none of those things with that friend. And if that label feels good to me, great, right? And so I don't think it has to be so vitriolic of don't use it. Although I do see the benefit, right? Of the benefit of getting outside of these language concepts. Because when we think about how language shapes our concept of reality, right? When you say, oh, this is a friend, depending on where you're at in this deconstruction process, that might actually signal a lack of importance, right? And so I can see the benefit of saying, oh, this is my friend rather than a partner, because it's almost putting me into this paradigm of less forced attachment control. But I think beyond that, it's also like, use the labels that work for you, right? Like we don't have to control the language, in my opinion, but
I
who am
completely
I? Who am
I
I?
Yeah, well, I no, I completely agree. And I think it's important within any given relationship that you and that person are comfortable with the language you use,
Right,
but you also have to be cognizant of how other people will interpret that word,
right, right,
right? So if I say I'm friends with this person and oh, we have sex as part of that friendship, they immediately go to friends with benefits
right.
and what stigma is attached to that within culture. And so
Totally.
it's more about, being able to clarify that word and how a broader society sees it, and
Mhm,
then deciding if that's important. Like I said to you earlier in the pre-interview, it's none of my business what other people think of me. And if they
mhm.
want to put a meaning or that, I have to decide what's that relationship about, and is it worth clarifying?
Right. Yeah. Because there's a lot of, the personal is political. There's a lot of power in, oh, one of my partners and I are going blank, right?
Yep, yep,
Versus one of my friends and I are going here. And so yeah, the person who's hearing that will, depending on what frame they're at, have a radically different read of that. And so maybe I want to be really political today and actually drop that and be like one of my partners and really send them through that, and also maybe I don't because this is a clinical psychology space where it's not always safe, like maybe I want to
yep,
hold that back, and you gotta go, okay. And so just the ability to kind of like, code switch at different times and make those political choices is a really big part of this. But like you said, yeah, checking in with our partners to make sure that, hey, I want to use this word. When I say partner, what does it mean to you? What does
yeah.
it mean to me? Do we both agree with those things? Because when I say partner, it might mean, okay, now there's a toothbrush at my house. We're going to check in every day. Like, right? Like, it's like,
Yep.
whoa. And so the clarity that comes from this level of conversation is like you said, hot and
Yep.
intimate.
Yep. There's meaning and there's expression, right? And what you just talked about is okay, we've used this word, it has a meaning, and what's the expression of that meaning? And, when I look at kind of what's happened over the last 50, 60 years around orientation and gender and sexual normativities, the non-monogamous world is still pretty much in the closet, and it's kind of the last frontier that I see around can we be open and honest and accepting of that? Multi-person marriages, it's like, so there's still kind of a stigma and I guess, closetedness about having this kind of alternative lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely there is, which is why I will say thank you for joining us today and being a part of changing that movement, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, that leads me into the next question of why do you practice relationship anarchy? Is any of that tied to your experience for you?
Yeah, it is. I'll rewind and give you a little kind of personal history. 25 years ago, I was married and living a kind of conventional life with kids and a house and a job and taking vacations and, I'll say an all right sex life, and wasn't happy.
Mm.
And it started me down this path to, like, let me re-examine my life, and it ended up leading to a divorce, and then moving out into the non-monogamous landscape and starting with something as simple as just swinging, and
Sure.
had lots of fun, but it lacked the intimacy that I wanted.
Right.
And so ended up doing a series of workshops through an organization that explores the dimensions of love, intimacy, and sexuality. And they don't promote anything, but it gave me a chance to start to do that deconstruction. And over time, I'd said it a little earlier that I discovered kind of my deeper pattern was to lose myself in the relationship. And so when I started being more circumspect around the kinds of relationships I wanted and the people that I was engaging with, it was some of those things around like, we could have great physical chemistry, but the emotional depth was not there, or the personal awareness was not there. And so just starting to see the relationships for what they were, and then letting that person show up how they were, and me showing up how I was. And it wasn't until maybe 2019, 20 that I forget where, got exposed to the concept of relationship anarchy. And I'm going, oh,
Mm.
this is what I call it, or this is what I'm
Mm.
doing. And so it's been an incredible journey of, and I've been at times in my life where I've had multiple partners. I went through phases where I was intentionally being celibate, and,
Right.
just tuning into, my sexuality, my expression, and really kind of what I wanted to focus on in life. There's a quote, and I forget who said it. We're moving from a world of the joining of genes to a world of co-creation. And
Mm.
what do we want to co-create in this relationship, and who are my co-creators, and what's that creative impulse that I think drives all of us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, which is so beautiful to think about just the existential narrative sharing and building and all of that. And it makes me think too about this idea of losing yourself in relationships, the complexities of that, but also finding yourself in relationship. Like I'm sure you found very specific parts of yourself as you co-created with someone, but of course tuning into when that feels not in alignment and authentic and needing to pull back and balance across. But there's so much that we find of ourselves in relationship, as much as I'm finding it right now in this conversation with you of like, who am I? It's like showing up in this present moment. And so yeah, I just think about the beauty of that as we co-create narratives together, right? And
Mhm.
having to check in with those narratives of like, again, yeah, this word, does that check with your, are you, we cool with? Okay, okay, keep going, right? And that sort of space and the beauty of that. And I guess I just also want to hold space for partners to celibacy, right? And like being a relationship anarchist across that smattering of ways that you do it, there's sometimes a very vitriolic anti-monogamy stance in the relationship anarchy community. I don't know if you've
Yep.
seen this,
Yes, indeed.
which I hear that, I hear it, and it was really nice to process it with one of my mentors She's a feminist psychologist, and I was talking to her. I was like, I got some comments on these posts, and someone who was like, "I'm anti-monogamy, I'm anti-family," and I was like, "This is
Mhm.
so interesting." And she's like, "It sounds like second wave feminism of anti-men."
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Okay, I understand why we're anti-men. I get it. Like, I get
Yep.
it. But we're not anti-men, right?
Yep.
And in the process of saying we're anti-men, we're excluding men from joining feminism. We're
Yeah.
anti-patriarchy. We can be
Yep.
anti-mononormativity, right?
Yep.
And still be pro-men, pro people who want to have sex with one person. Like, God, it doesn't have to be, like, I spin my head, as you can tell on this one.
Yep. And there's a huge thing to unpack there, around patriarchal culture. And I'll just be honest again. I'm at the top of the pyramid, a white American male, right? And doesn't get any more privileged than that. And there's a really good book called Unplugging the Patriarchy. And it talks about this idea of, the patriarchy is as wounded, right, as the matriarchy is. And, I get labeled all the time as being that cis white male. And it's like, you don't know me, right? And so, how do we step into, again, those assumptions of how someone presents or a word we're using and think about it in a broader cultural term and, through my personal expression?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And holding space for that growth period for people because yeah, like you said, the patriarchy is hurt, right? Hurt people. So man,
Exactly.
it's like holding that space for all of the men out there, and we don't have to value grade or compare suffering, right? We can just
Yep.
hold that there's separate differences that everyone goes through in this path and the journey that all it is, especially in generational differences, right? You went through a very different world than I'm moving through. And I think that's what
Absolutely.
also gives me hope too, right? Is like as we're having these conversations and sitting in this nuance, finding our connection points, I hope that these level of conversations will shake future generations who step out. Maybe they don't even have to use the word relationship anarchy because they're already here so collectively in the consciousness that they're
Yep.
they're already rocking it there. And so I'll be excited to see where future generations are at once, they're our age, your age.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The generational differences that we're experiencing, and I work with a lot of young people in some of my social work, and completely understand that the world that you're looking at today is very different than the world I looked at when I was your age. And
Hmm.
and what it I think creates is again that opportunity for co-creation. And I've kind of reached a point in my life where there's a lot of people talking, and words are great. Who are the practitioners, right? Because that's where the rubber hits the road, and then it becomes this social experiment and this kind of self-awareness, self-feedback kind of mindset helps us to okay, I'm going to set an intention, and I'll get an outcome, and is it what I intended or not? And then I can take the feedback and start to look at that and iterate and improve. And that's kind of the broader sense that just goes beyond relationship and our politics and our economics in all of our society that are pretty much name a system that's not in crisis right now.
Right, right, absolutely. And yeah, speaking of praxis, right, the rubber hits the road. I know we've hit on this gently in a couple of different points, but the next question is how does relationship anarchy impact your practice of intimacy? It's the fun one.
Yeah, I mean, it's about being straightforward. It's building a bridge of trust and rapport and a container
Yeah.
as you and I get to know each other. And
Mhm.
I use several dating apps, and it's pretty much a shit show out there right now. You can bleep that out if you need to.
No, you can curse here. It's welcome.
that and so it is that kind of incremental kind of connection and me getting to know you. And I'll give you an example. My kind of practice around the dating apps is I meet someone, or connect with someone, and we'll dialogue back and forth. And first kind of gateway is, how does that conversation go? Are you curious about me? Do you ask questions? Do you answer the questions that I'm curious about you? So we build kind of like, oh, okay, there's a curiosity here. And if that goes well, then let's have a phone call, right? Let's see what the real-time interactive kind of dynamic is. And if that goes well, then maybe we meet and just, I saw something on somebody's profile that says they approach it more of a slow burn.
Mm.
And so here was a personal example. I had this great interaction with a woman on the dating site. We had a first phone call. It
Yeah.
was great. And then one day she texted me, and the thing you'll learn about me is like, I'm not online. I'm not
Sure.
addicted to my phone. I'm not Pavlov's dog that
Mhm.
when it dings that I have to look at it. My phone is
Sure.
sitting over on the shelf right now on silent mode, and
As I
I'll
have mine
probably forget it, right?
right next to me. Generational differences. Oh, I am a
Yeah.
sucker.
And so this, and I had a busy day,
Yeah.
and so this woman had texted me,
Mhm.
and it's like I respond in my timeline, and later that afternoon I get this long
Oh no.
diatribe from her about why I hadn't responded, what was wrong with me,
Oh
yada yada yada.
no.
And so here was my response: thanks. I don't think we'd be a good match.
Yeah. Which is super fair because the amount
Yeah.
of assumptions that went into that without any level of conversation about communication styles, how frequent, right? Like that was a
Yes.
really good read on the situation, you know?
Yeah. Again, here's one of my mantras: when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
I know, but you know how hard that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is so, Nicole, this is what I love is I have a landscape of people that they know about my orientation and my style of relationship, and so I can do reality checks,
Sure.
and again, depending on where we are on that progression of building that bridge of rapport, and I love that kind of metaphor. We're creating a bridge here together,
Mhm.
will dictate how I might respond. With the example I gave you, it's like, I've just started the bridge out and I already know that I'm pulling it back,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But if it's somebody that I have gotten further down that road, then I'll have that conversation. Gee, what's going on for you? Are you curious about my experience?
Absolutely. The wisdom there of the nuance, right? Of how long have I known this person? How
Exactly.
reasonable are they, right? Like all of that stuff. I think a lot of us get lost in the, oh no, I am hurting this person. Look at this long text that they sent me. And oh God, oh my God, I should definitely console them. And oh no, right? And wanting to respond, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And which comes from a good place of we
Yep.
see another human in suffering. We know that we were inadvertently a part of that dynamic that caused that for them. But to then also have to take that step back and look and say, whoa, like you did, right? Like the amount of assumptions that went into this are really, really high. There
Yeah.
is going to be no world where I'm going to gently fix this without it requiring so much time and energy from me that I would have to teach them about expectations. It's like, okay, I cannot extend myself to that extent, right? And so we have to, all of us included, watch the people pleasing tendencies for us to always be happy, making everyone happy and happy. Like, you're going to piss people off. Like, people,
Yep.
you're going to piss
Yep.
people off.
Exactly. You again use that word assumptions, and again, this for me is an example of how I've evolved with one particular relationship that I started before COVID. It was a woman I met on a dating site, and she was what I call a non-monogamous tire kicker, which
What does that mean for
like,
you?
well, it means that she was exploring that for herself.
Okay.
She'd never, tried it, didn't know if it was what she wanted. We had a great social dynamic. We had a great sexual dynamic. And when COVID hit, it put her in a place of, I want something that's more grounded, more traditional. And because we'd had that social and sexual connection, that we had that intimacy, both physically and emotionally, we took a break for a while to kind of let some of that settle and deconstruct. And, there's almost a withdrawal from the
Sure.
oxytocin that we go through,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so, and then we got, back in communication, and now we're great friends. This past summer, I did a
Mm.
trip to Europe, and she's married now, and
Yeah.
she joined me on part of the trip. We don't have the sexual component right now, but we have this deep connection. So that's another example of how far down this path of building this bridge of rapport have we
Mhm.
gone?
Right, exactly. And I love the space of reconfiguring, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
great word, right? Great
right.
word. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I never make an assumption because we've had sex in the past that we're going to have sex in the future.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so then being able to hold space for the ways that change is inevitable. We
Yep.
know we're going to change, our dynamic's going to change. And so, what does it mean to be in active conversation about that so that, if one way that we're relating is no longer working for us, like sex, what are
Yep.
other ways that we can relate that it will feel good, even if that means less frequency, right? Like,
Yep.
I think I really appreciate this space of relationship anarchy reconfiguration to maintain the relationship and just the level of intimacy, conversation, insight it takes to be able to have that, especially when we're looking at like marriage divorce rates, right? And this like rupturing of relationships that just end, and that happens in poly spaces too a lot. And I
Yep.
really appreciate this dynamic of relationship anarchy of no, each individual relationship, we're having a conversation about what works in our relationship for us. We can take it off, we can put it back on. We can take it off, we can put it back on. And in that space, what a beautiful, mature relational dynamic.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it pulls back to something you'd said earlier. It's about self-sovereignty
Yeah.
and self-empowerment, and I'm responsible for my choices. But
Mm-hmm.
here's something that I don't think gets discussed as often in any of the kind of non-monogamous spaces, and even in more traditional spaces, is expectations, right? You're not responsible for any expectations that I may have imposed on you or on myself. And I think how much of our hurt comes from unexpressed expectations, or maybe unexpressed desires and expectations that you're going to meet those desires.
A lot, right? So a lot.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot, right? Because if so, right now, I don't know if I'd use the word saturated or how, like, I have a full relational world, right? I've got a
yep, yep,
full relational world of beautiful, deep, and how I kind of describe it is kind of like planets, right? So I've got some people
yep,
that orbit really close to me, we talk every day, others that kind of stretch out, right? And so if someone starts to come into my world, and again, this is any type of relationship, and now say we have sex, right? There
mhm.
might be, and again, because of cultural, classical conditioning on all of the assumptions, okay, so now Nicole's going to text me every day. We're going to start to talk every day. And then eventually we might live together. And then we're going to like swap last names. And then, like, and to me,
Yep,
I'd be like, whoa, my friend, hold on. Like, just because we had sex does not mean we're going to be talking every day. Now, then the scary part is they might be in a therapist office going, I met this girl, Nicole, and we had sex. And now she told me she won't talk to me every day. Isn't she an avoidant attachment? And you're like,
yep,
holy shit. You're like,
yep,
dude, you don't understand. I have so many close relationships, but you're making so many assumptions within our cultural scripts of what it means to be attached when, like, I'm trying to be as clear as possible that, like, this is what I want. And right here at this rate and this distant.
yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole swamp full of alligators there. And again, I've kind of settled into this solo kind of mindset. And part of it is because I like my space.
Totally.
I'm not saying I won't ever live with someone again. It's interesting. I've just recently had someone that I've actually slept with overnight because my sleep dynamic can be very
Sure.
challenging for, another person to be in the bed with me. And so it's like I'm just kind of like, let me focus on what I feel called to in my life. And then who are the relationships that, and I love this word of orbit, that are in kind of this orbit around me, and some of them are close, like Mercury and Venus, and some of them are out there like Pluto and and Neptune.
Yeah.
And to me, the test of any relationship always becomes whatever length of time that we've been apart, how quickly we can drop back into that depth.
Mm-hmm.
And having that depth of relationship, and being able to share what's going on, and your secrets, right, are something we all crave and struggle to create, right? We never get formalized training on how to build deep, intimate relationship. And maybe
Right.
we'll go to that therapist and they'll help us deconstruct things. And this is one of the things that I loved about this series of workshops that I did, is
Mm-hmm.
it was based on practical exercises with people that you had these conversations with. Like, here, how do you have a safe sex conversation with someone,
Right.
or put your body parts together,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually practice that,
Right.
with no intention of having sex within the
Sure.
workshop. But if I want to get good at something, I need to practice it.
Yeah, and you learn in relationships, right? I mean, it's
Exactly.
mind-boggling to me. I've said this before on the podcast that we like teach people geometry and not relationships, and let's replace it. And someone's like, "No, we need geometry." I was like, "Okay, fine, 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 fine." But I just want to add it to the curriculum, right? Just like,
Yep.
yeah, like basic relational skills, knowing how much relationships shape our concept of reality and our well-being. I mean, yeah, that feels so essential. And like you were saying, with the planets that orbit much further away, right? Some of those can still have a really heavy, I mean, granted, my degree is in clinical psychology. I'm not a physicist. I don't know, you know what I mean? But like they
They
can,
have gravity.
yes, even if they're really far out, right? If it's a big planet, like it still pulls on you, right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot of ways that we can have relationships that I see once every couple of years, and we can reconnect and play or whatever feels good for us, right? And so that sort of spaciousness, again, I think is part of the beauty of this practice.
Exactly. And I loved you talking about, why is it not part of the curriculum? Yeah, Nicole, I call it the fourth R:
Mm,
reading, writing, arithmetic, relationship. And in school we pack kids into this, tight, intimate environment, and we don't teach them how to relate to one another. What the fuck?
I know. Well, this is why the podcast is here, my friend. Like, hey.
Yeah. But again, it's such a taboo thing
Right.
to talk about sexuality. Okay, we've got sex ed now. We can talk about the mechanics of it.
I don't
But
know.
yeah, not exactly, at a very superficial level,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about relationship dynamic.
Hmm.
And again, back to something I said earlier, and we definitely don't talk about a non-monogamous relationship dynamic. That's still
Hmm.
taboo. We're
Yeah.
still in the closet in some respects. I mean, yeah, there are people that are living this lifestyle, but it's not a cultural conversation that's being had.
Absolutely. It's
Until I
starting.
meet some woman like Nicole who's wanting to do that and have a podcast. So good on you,
Absolutely.
girl.
Thank you. Yeah, and absolutely it is starting. Like I saw the New York Mag come out with an article of like how did polyamory become so popular? Like it's happening. Like the cultural phenomena is happening, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll be super curious in a couple of years just to see where it's at. And I know there's going to be so much movement. And before we get to that space of an even safer and more open space for us to practice all of these things, I'm sure you found some difficulties. This is my nice little segue to question number 6. What are some of the difficulties that you've experienced with relationship anarchy?
Well, the first and foremost one is time management.
Oh, oof,
You
totally.
know?
When you're at a buffet of options,
Yeah.
you get a stomach ache a few times and you go, okay,
Yeah.
I can't do that again.
And well, and you use that word of being saturated,
Mhm.
and for me, again, it's like life balance. And
Yeah.
even though I'm retired from the 9 to 5 thing, I'm still very active and doing a lot of social kinds of change and activities. And so finding that balance of that and, kind of looking at the you, me, and the we
Hmm.
and how they come together. And so that for me is, probably one of the biggest challenges. The other one is, and again, it's not to be judgmental, but to assess where a person is at on their personal journey. So my earlier story about, the woman who was a tire kicker, I went into that very intentionally. And part of that was because of just the conversation we had and, you know, her willingness to have open conversation and owning her piece of where she was at and what she was exploring. That can be one of the pitfalls, right? That a person's not kind of owning their piece of it. Expectations or assumptions are being made there, and so for me, it has been an interesting journey across this 25 years of, different dimensions of, non-monogamous relationships and then kind of settling into where I'm at in my life. I mean, there was a point when I was being monogamous because I just didn't have the time.
Hmm.
And this is an interesting, you just kind of it clicked in my head. It's like once we start having sex, somehow there's like a assumption
Oh,
of
yeah.
more energy
Yes.
being directed
Yes.
into that connection and relationship.
Uh-huh. That's actually what I was gonna pin back. I've been talking about this a lot in my community of just, right, if we think about friendships, it's much easier for most of us to conceptualize how we will space out, oh, okay, I'll see this friend every month. I'll see this friend once a year. I'll see this friend. But the second it's sex, it's because of purity culture, because of internalized mononormativity, right? Oh, this is, oh, sex. Oh, okay, every day, every week, every, like some frequency, right? Like really frequency here, right? And so,
Yeah.
oh my God. Okay. To be able to know internally of, wow, that was a delicious cake I just had. I think I want to have that every week, maybe once a month. I don't know. That sounds good. The amount of internal insight in a society that's so sexually repressed and
Hmm.
expectations of people pleasing, et cetera, et cetera. It takes so much internal work to be able to actually name that in your sexual dynamics of like, hey, this play was really fun. Let's do it again in a month, right? Like there's so much pressure around that. And so I think part of the relationship anarchy for me and myself is actually like, what is my appetite for this person?
Yes, yes, that's a
Holy
great
shit.
word.
It's
That's a great
hard.
word. Yeah.
Yeah.
And navigating that and can I have the same freedom in and again it's based on reaching a certain level of rapport with a person and connection with that person to say, hey, let's go out to dinner or let's go to a concert or let's fuck,
Right.
that like
Right.
just to be in that dynamic of what that bridge that we've co-created together represents. And me
Mhm.
being okay with you say, hey, I'd love to go to a concert. Hey, you know what? I'm not kind of feeling the physical fucking kind of energy right now.
Sure.
And just to like flow with that. And then I kind of look at someone I've worked with that's a therapist, talks about this bridge of rapport. And where am I on the bridge? Am I on your side? And in your business, we might call it codependency. Or am I on my side and I'm kind of withdrawn and isolated? And
Mm.
then, I personally have experienced, and it's more my generational thing, I think, where women want the man to pursue them, and you're kind of holding back on your side of the bridge. And this woman that I've had a few sexual dates with, she sent me this video of a woman kind of doing a rap, like a poetry jam around, we'll give him our heart before we'll give him our pussy. And it's like, doesn't that seem a little backwards? It's like, maybe you just let sex be what it is. And does this person deserve your heart, right? Can they
Totally.
hold your heart,
Totally. Yeah.
right? I mean, hey, can they satisfy you physically? But
Sure.
what about that emotional piece? And so I think that again, it's been this experiment for me of, yeah, I've tripped, I've fallen, I get back up, kind of look back at what my piece of it was, right? What did I not see,
Yeah.
right? What was I unaware of? And then now, living life, and I have amazing people in my life. I'm doing some incredible things. And,
Yeah.
who I invite into my bed, just another piece of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like decoupling, do you have to have the heart and sex together? No.
Right.
Do you want it? Sure. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's up to you, my friend. What do you, your life, live with the freedom, And so, like,
exactly.
again, yeah, like deconstructing those cultural scripts and just thinking about, what a paradigm shift it is to go through this level of awakening. And I'm conscious of the ways that the non-monogamy community, again, we're talking about relationship anarchy, but frequently the non-monogamy community looks back at monogamous folks as unenlightened. And again, that's like looking at the men and being like, men are unenlightened. It's like, hey, I hear you, right? We all
He's
have
part of the
things.
patriarchy.
Right, right, and right. And
Yeah.
it's not all men, it's not all cis hets, it's not all monogamous folks, right? So I think we just have to hold nuance for the reality of there is a level of deconstruction of mononormativity and deconstructing patriarchy and deconstructing all these other things that does put you into a radically different paradigm. And you could go through all of that paradigm shifting and then choose what sometimes is labeled as conscious monogamy, right? As almost this
Yep.
like awakened version of, all of that again. And maybe that language is complex in terms of what we're saying about other people. But like we do have to hold the fact that once you've gone to this level of like, okay, let's take off the relationship escalator. Let's take off these assumptions. Let's take off the romance myth that if you love me, it has to be only me, and that if you have sex, it has to be only me. And then you get to the space like that is a radically different paradigm that you are now moving through the world with. And along the way to getting to that is messy and continual mess and mess and mess and mess. And then we look back and we're like, damn, I learned a lot,
Yeah.
It's
And
crazy.
and what does this word conscious
Right.
mean? What does this word ethical mean? There's a Instagram. What's it? Wednesday? Oh, I forget her first name. She's written a book on women's desire. It's called Untrue.
Mm,
She was posting a couple of things about this idea of ethical and conscious. I use a different word, intentional
I love that.
on monogamous, right?
Yeah.
I'm intentionally being in my relationships, and it might be, monogamous, it might be non-monogamous. And so it just makes it clear that I'm bringing my intention to
Hmm.
the, dynamic that I want to create. And, again, let's just be honest. It's around the sex piece.
Right. Which makes me think part of this movement is, and all movements and cultural movements, is a lack of language to describe these things,
Yep.
which makes me think, as someone who's a part of this journey of shaping this, I'm thinking how it could maybe be helpful for particularly relationship anarchists to get outside of the frame of monogamy and non-monogamy because it puts this binary to our relational world versus what about a conversation of sexual fidelity and sexual self-governance, right? Like, do you move
Yep.
through the world with a agreement to practice sexual fidelity here with this person, even within this polycule, right? Do you have that practice there if it's a
Yep.
closed system? Or are you moving through the world with sexual self-governance, which is not complete chaos, right? Let's talk about anarchy. It's about community. So, of course, if you have, a fluid bond with one person, you're not just going to go and have unprotected sex with another person when you're moving with sexual self-governance. Let's get really clear. It's not just do your own shit, right? But
Yeah.
I almost think that maybe that dichotomy could kind of get us past this conversation of, oh, I'm here and doing this. It's like, no, I practice that. This is how I practice my sex stuff, right? Because that's what we're
Yep.
talking about.
Yeah, and it's funny, we mentioned earlier this idea of we relationship anarchy. We don't put labels on our relationships, but just using that term, we put a label
Totally, totally.
on
I know it's
ourselves,
dizzying. I know.
right? So
Yeah,
it's kind of circular reasoning that we've
right.
got going on there, and then how that gets navigated, and this idea people think anarchy is about that chaos. Anarchy is about more, from my world, of not letting someone impose their rules and boundaries on me. I totally want to honor yours and hear yours and, create that container. You mentioned earlier the landscape and left out the whole landscape of trauma,
Yeah,
right? That we have sexual trauma that
totally.
people are navigating as well. And, we're in such a society that wants to label something. And I don't know if you've heard this concept of othering.
Yeah,
Those other people are the
right.
problem or the issue. And, I want to step back and find those co-creative and, explore this landscape of, this life that I have as an individual, free-willed, sovereign being, and you the same. And where's the intersection of that? And I guess the thing, this is something that I struggle with a bit right now is, and it's not you said about the non-monogamous polyamorous community can sometimes think that they're somehow more enlightened than other people. It's like, yeah, well, what does that mean? Or this idea
Right.
of enlightenment. It's like, in, the whole concept of woke, to me, it's really about seeing where you're at and just meeting you there.
Yeah.
And the struggle I have is I have a pretty high bar, and it will dictate at what level of intimacy I'm willing to have with you. This same woman who shared this, this video around why we withhold the pussy and give away the heart. She said it's much easier for me to share my body with you than it is to share my heart. And it's like, I get it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's again about that incremental, and here's the thing, it's not a time, it's a willingness to kind of dive into that depth, that transparency, that, how much am I willing to share, that vulnerability. I mean, vulnerability.
Yeah. And I have to make very specific decisions of who I do that with, right? Based on, who that person is, what I've gained about their worldview, et cetera, et cetera. And so the empowerment to make that choice of I'm not going to open up about this more vulnerable thing that I'm currently chewing on and processing because relationships are mirrors. They're more than mirrors. They're also, a story, a canvas. But when we look into that mirror, if I open up about this tender thing I'm processing and then you judge me, and it's impossible to not be impacted by that, right? And so imagine trying to look in a broken mirror and being like struggling to see yourself and go, why am I so hurt by this? It's like we opened ourselves up to this person. So I make very intentional as best as I can every day. I'm learning, right? To check in and be like, do I want to share this with this person? Do I want to open up? And I think that's a very specific thing to do in this because like even just a recent experience in my rock climbing community where I was like, oh, I practice non-monogamy. And the person goes, oh God, I wouldn't want to catch STDs. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. That was a miss, my friend. That was a miss and very indicative of where you're at. And I'm going to gauge future conversations of how much I disclose now. And
Yep.
I think you'll eventually like my conversations about free will because I think it's really fascinating to think about what it means in terms of self-governance. How do we move through free will when we are social beings that are shaped by our society in such ways that it does drastically alter what we consider to be possible, right? Like when I was in Christian culture and I was straight and monogamous, even though I'm queer and a relationship anarchist now, did I have free will at that point, right? My existential professor would say, yes, you had free will with what's within your existential awareness, right?
Yep.
But like, fuck, that existential awareness was really restricted by some systems. So I continue to just chew on like what free will means for all of us and scratch my head about it all because that's an important part of this too, right? It's messy.
Yeah. Well, now it's my turn to push back on you a little bit around this idea of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I got to this place where, can I just bare my chest to you and just open my heart and stand fully in that and know that you could plunge a knife into it.
Sure.
And yeah, it's going to be painful, but it won't kill me. And it will very quickly let me see the dynamic that we have.
Sure.
And then I say, okay, now there's a boundary here. And so, and that's just maybe it's a place I'm at in my life. And like, what does it take to get there? And as a kid, we used to hear this sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's a fucking lie.
Right, exactly.
It just hurts
Exactly.
a different part, right?
Right.
And worse, it hurts a part that's not necessarily visible on the
Mm-hmm.
outside,
Right.
right?
Right. Given what I do with psychedelics, sex, relationships, there's definitely been spaces where like I've quite literally experienced backlash in the clinical psychology system and been,
Yep,
yeah, so it's just such a difficult space to know like, yeah, when is it safe, when is it not? But I can imagine that the rootedness of your lived experience, right? To like get to this space where you're just like, I'm me. I've lived these many years and you can't change my rooted tree that I am. You know what I mean? So I hope that all of us can get to that space of like deep rootedness in who we are.
absolutely. And again, it is very much life circumstance. I'm outside the system now,
Yeah,
so I don't
lucky.
have to give a shit about what they think. And good for you, woman, that you're
Thanks.
navigating that system and you are out there on the front lines.
I
And
appreciate
so
that.
you're going to take, I don't like, violent metaphors, but
Right.
the first man or woman over the wall takes a lot of bullets.
Totally, totally,
And so,
totally.
that's why I love what you're doing, and appreciate it. Would love to support it in any way
Yeah,
I
thank
can.
you.
And yeah, is it going to take 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I don't know.
Right.
But if we don't talk about it and if we don't educate around it, then it's never going to change.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a journey and a half, a fun one to climb the mountain, especially when I'm thinking about the future of like sex therapy with psychedelics. Like, oh, like that mountain sounds real. I'm gonna climb it, but fuck, that sounds really complicated. But I think it's also a part of this space of like, sure, I'm not privileged in various ways, but I also white,
Yep,
passing heterosexual from the streets, who knows, right? So I think
yep,
also when we are moving through this world, what does it mean with our privilege to be the one that tries to go over the wall and tries to do it in a very like, I have benefits, let me use it to actually be the one that takes that.
absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
Using privilege is not about standing above, it's about lifting others up.
right.
And how do we create that system? How do we create that container where we for those that are ready to take that step up, to take that next journey? And how much of rules or even commitments in relationships are just a way for me to protect something that I don't want to face,
Sure.
right? And again, not my business to project onto you that you should deal with that, right? That's again, it's a personal sovereignty thing. And so navigating from that, it's cliche. It's the journey, right? We don't
Right.
have a destination in mind here.
Hmm.
It's just that journey and being able to hold a bigger container. And the thing I've found that, like, so when you disclosed with your friend that you were non-monogamous and they reacted around STIs,
Yeah.
okay, that then informs me around where this person is thinking, and then I like to get curious. And is there a question? Like, first, is there an openness? I might ask a question that maybe helps them see that assumption that they've made. And
Hmm.
no attachment to it. It's more of a curiosity thing. And to
Yeah,
me, that's the way I find people who are more on this kind of evolutionary path.
sure. Hmm. Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about the difficulties, but I'm curious, what are some of the joys of relationship anarchy?
Just really fulfilling relationships. I have people in my life that I know I can go anywhere with. And, again, an example, 10 years ago, my father passed away, and a woman that I've known for 20 plus years, and we've never really had a sexual dynamic. And, up until I kind of adopted this relationship anarchy mindset, I wouldn't have seen it as that kind of relationship, but it is. And I called her up and I said, I just need somebody to hold me while I cry.
Mm,
And so there's a beauty in that, we're not putting all our physical, emotional, intellectual eggs in one basket,
hmm.
right?
Yeah. An expansive garden of connection. There's so much beauty in that.
Exactly. And, and this dimension of, what is love, what is intimacy, and what is sexuality. And they're independent of one another, and I have incredible loving people in my life. And, many of my friends, I've lived in my house for 30 years. And so my neighborhood, we raised kids together, we socialized together. I'm the single crazy one in the group, and they know, they don't always ask,
Yeah.
I think because they respect me enough to know that who I am as a person. And so there's that richness to it. And also, the personal growth around relationship. We need other people to rub up against. And yeah, it's painful, but painful, in my case, it wakes me up, Oh, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Well, maybe you should stop doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, we grow in relationships and so much growth even through our conversation for both of us here today. And, the last question of all of this is what do you wish other people knew about relationship anarchy?
But that's a possibility. You know, Everybody knows what celibacy is. Everybody knows what monogamy is. Non-monogamy is pretty much everything else. And this landscape that I've come to experience in relationship anarchy feels the most natural and kind of welcoming and freeing for me. It's also the most growthful and challenging as well. And so I guess, how well do you want to know you? So there's intimacy and there's into me, I see. And I just, I have amazing people in my life.
Mm.
A joyful, happy. And it doesn't mean that I don't have my days where it's like
Oh,
I'm
totally.
like on the couch, streaming some, mindless thing on the TV or on my tablet, but there's a freedom to it.
Yeah, many days of crying, confusion,
Yeah.
misunderstanding myself, but all of it, right? And I'm here for it. So I'm so happy that you were able to join us today and be able to, take a step towards changing the paradigms, right? Creating this public conversation so that we can really continue to change the cultural conversation around this practice.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that work and going over
Mhm.
the wall and
Thank you.
and putting the energy into creating this container to have that conversation
Yeah.
because that's just as important and and this is kind of a personal kind of perspective as you as a woman. I think it's even more powerful coming from that perspective because we have such a social conditioning, a man who has a lot of desire is a stud and a woman who has a lot of desire is a slut,
Right?
right? And it's
Exactly.
like, you know what? So I think that's important, and yeah, the generation that is, I think the millennials are struggling with back to this. It's a very different world. So thank you for being the impetus
Oh.
for
Mhm.
having these conversations.
I appreciate that a lot. I really appreciate that and the scenes of trying to shatter the Madonna and the horror complex to stand in the middle proudly and to say, yeah. And then to do it eventually with my doctor title behind the name, be like, yeah, now listen to me now,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hopefully using that power to wield the ability to kind of break that binary as much as I can. So I appreciate that scenes and I want to hold a little bit of space just to check in and see if there's anything else you wanted to say with the listeners. Otherwise, I have a closing question that I ask everybody on the podcast.
Yeah, I think we've covered a pretty broad landscape. And, I guess what I would say to everybody, this is your personal journey out there.
Yeah.
And, use it as the mirror, use it as the opportunity, and decide what destination you're sailing towards. And as you're on that journey, it's okay to change course.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Following your pleasure will take you to unexpected destinations.
Exactly. Sometimes we have this desire and it brings us together because we're here to complete something. And other times we have this desire because we're here to come together and move forward and co-create. The challenge is you don't know which it is until you follow the desire.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if it feels good to you, I'll ask that last closing question for us.
Bring it on, Nicole.
Okay. So, the closing question that I ask everybody on the podcast is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
It is more like there is no normal,
Hey, again, anarchist test. You passed, right? That's the
right?
first
And
answer. Check, check.
and discovering your landscape and
Yeah.
um, we live in such a fear-based world, and our mind is really good at making up stories, fear, false evidence appearing real, and go experience something. And sometimes I don't know where my boundaries are till I've stepped past them. And so then it becomes important to, do it with intention. Enjoy your journey and know that you will experience pain. You'll experience incredible joy. You'll experience, challenges, right? And to give yourself the freedom to do that and
Hmm.
have the courage. When I was doing some of my shadow coaching training, I got to this place where I said to myself, there's no part of me that I'm not willing to see.
Mm.
And in that, I discovered a level of freedom that I could not have imagined before. And I think that's the hard part, that little existential bubble that we live in. It's hard to imagine what's on the outside of that. And if you've started down this journey, I think relationship anarchy is a great, again, mindset and kind of practice in which to expand that bubble and enjoy the journey.
Yes. I really want to thank you for bringing your vulnerability into the
Mhm.
space and for sharing about your lived experience. There's always for me a joy in these conversations of relationship anarchy because I didn't know you prior to this hour and a half that we spent together, right? But there's a knowingness in the words relationship anarchy and what that means to both of us. And so there's always such a joy and a zest for life that comes out of these conversations, and then a profound grief to know that I could probably talk to you for hours and learn from you for hours, right? And have to keep myself to some level of closure. And so I just want to thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me onto the call.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.